Hey Sainers, and welcome back to another video on the Saints TV YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to be rating every St Kilda player's season out of 10. Let's get into it. Okay, so first player that we're rating out of 10 today is Dan Butler. When I think Dan Butler, I think he tried a lot, he got a lot of chances, and in the end, just wasn't really the player that we thought he would be this year based on his form last year. So I'm going to cut this short, and I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10. Now to Brad Hill. He started the year pretty slow. We all know that. There was a lot of publicity about it, so you couldn't miss it. But his second half of the year was pretty good. So his first half, I'd say, was probably a 3, and then his second half was more like a 6. So I'll give him a 6 out of 10 because he picked up his form, and that to me shows great character. Jack Steele, I don't really need to even think about this. He's up there on the wall for a reason. He just was, named in the All-Australian team for the second consecutive year. He's going to win his second consecutive Trevor Barker medal in a couple of weeks, and no doubt he's going to feature very heavily in the Brownlow voting, probably top 2, top 3, maybe even win it if the umpires watch the game properly. So I'm going to give Jack Steele an easy one, 10 out of 10. Cal Wilkie, the guy just gets it done. He played, I think, pretty much every game for the season. He played 22 games, only one of 4 players to do that. The other 3 were mentioned already in this video in Dan Butler, Brad Hill, and Jack Steele. Now Cal Wilkie, he's just the Mr. Consistent. He's the accountant in the back half. He's calm, he's cool, he's collected. He gets the job done every week. I'm going to give Cal Wilkie an 8 out of 10. Now to Tim Membry. Skunk, he had some really good games. He also had some pretty quiet games, but overall, I think his season was solid. I wouldn't say it was one of his best seasons, but he's in the leadership group. I thought that he stood tall late in the season. He had some pretty big games late, and he gives it his all. Even when he has a down game, you know that he gives it his all, and that says a lot about him. So based on that, I'm going to give Tim Membry 7 out of 10. Now for who I think is probably our most improved player of the year, Jack Sinclair. The guy off halfback is just elite. He's probably one of our best kicks. He is Mr. Consistent along with Jack Steele, Cal Wilkie, and these sort of guys, in that you know what you're going to get from him every single week. He puts his head over the ball, but he's also got that finesse. He's got that clinicalness about him when he gets the ball, and you can trust the ball in his hands that he's going to hit the target. It's not going to be a turnover. So Jack Sinclair, based on the fact that I think he's one of our most improved, I'm going to give Jack Sinclair an 8.5 out of 10. First season as a Saint, Brad Crouch. I think, we got pretty much what we wanted from him. We got that support for Jack Steele. He had some big number games. He started slow. He had to ease into it, but there was a patch, I think probably maybe just before the bye, just after the bye, where he had 4 or 5 games and he just had 26s, 27s, 30s, 30 pluses every week. And he just got going the longer the season went on. So Brad Crouch, no issues there. I'm pretty happy with what he delivered this year. I'm going to give him probably a 7 out of 10. Now for Big Maxi King. Big Max, the number 12. Again, similar to a lot of players, when I go through the list here of every player that's played for the club this year, they all started relatively slow, but really got going late in the year, and that's why I'm so bullish about 2022, but also why I think a lot of these players' ratings are pretty decent in the end. They would have been, if I had have done this at the halfway mark of the year after the bye, they'd all be 2s, 3s, 4s, 1s. But they picked up their form. The team got better as the season went on, and obviously collectively and individually that happened as well. But for Max King, his second half of the year, we don't even need to talk about it because we all know that he's going to be a superstar, and he proved that in the second half of the year with a couple of bags against West Coast, and then I think he kicked a 4 and a 3 multiple times. He was our leading goal kicker for the year. He averaged just under 2 goals per game, going at I think about 1.9 goals per game, which is outstanding for basically going through his second official year. So Max King, I'm going to give him a 7.5 out of 10. Now for another best and fairest winner, two-time best and fairest winner to be exact, Seb Ross. I don't know. It's a hard one to gauge because Seb does some things and you're like, good on you, Seb. Great tackle, great chase, great pressure. Oh, decent kick. There's those sort of moments in a game where you're like, why don't you do that every week, Seb, And I think we all judge him pretty harshly, but when you want to become a really good team and you want to feature in finals and you want to win flags and be successful, it's players like Seb Ross that need to tweak their performances and get more out of themselves because they're workhorses. They're the players that aren't blessed with speed. They aren't blessed with the great marking power or strength. But what they do is run all day and they try their best and try and support their teammates. And with Seb, he did that, a few times this year, I'd say. And he had some average performances on other occasions. So for Seb, I'm probably just going to stick to the easy one and go with a 5 out of 10. Jimmy Webster, great to have him back this year. He's been kind of injury-riddled the last couple of years, but he got through 20 games this year. He finished really strongly. I think he got Saner of the day, or he got close to that in the last game of the year in Tassie, in his hometown, I believe. With Ben Patton being down for the year, we were always looking, is it going to be Geary? And Geary went down, obviously. And we needed someone to pick up that small forward defender position, the small defender. And he did that and hit the ground running. And what he brings over the top of any of our other smalls in defense is his kicking. And his kicking is beautiful. It's very attacking. It sets us up aggressively. And I think that's a big strength that we have over a lot of other teams, in that we can really create a lot of our attacks from defense because of players like Jimmy Webster, and he was consistent all year round as well. He played on some very good small forwards and he kept them to 1 goal to no goals, and supported the rest of the backline beautifully. So for Jimmy Webster, it's an easy one. I'm going to give him probably an 8 out of 10. Jack Higgins, another first-year Saints, lifelong Saints fan, but we got him from Richmond and we're all really excited about that. Again, I thought that he started the season okay, but not amazing. But he was just consistent, from probably round 4 onwards, and he's kicked very important goals for us. There was a couple of games where he could have kicked bags, but he didn't. But he, again, like a lot of other players I've mentioned already, he just tries every week, and you know what you're going to get from Jack Higgins. He plays with his heart on his sleeve. He's got personality about him, and it was great to see him hit the scoreboard in the last game of the year, in the second last game of the year, and get going because his effort deserved more at times. He put so much into every performance but didn't get the result in terms of goals or stats or anything like that. But to see him get through the season and be basically our highest scoring small is really critical. I think he kicked over 24, 25 goals. And that's great for a first-year Saint, and he's only going to get better, and he's still very young. So a lot of upside for Higo. I'm going to give his season a 6.5 out of 10. Jack Billings, similar to Seb Ross, some really decent games, but then also just went missing for a lot of them. And even when he had a lot of the ball in certain games, you probably didn't notice him as much as someone else. He's not been as damaging as we would have liked, and that's probably why we've kind of found him in trade talks and whether it's worth getting rid of him. And a lot of Sainters are willing to because they see him as replaceable, and that's probably not an accurate representation of the talent that this guy has. It's just where he sits, and from all reports, he has had a few injury niggles this year, and he's played through them. So we have to consider that when we consider the rating. So Jack Billings, he averaged 20 disposals a game. Again, you don't really notice him doing it. He just gets it done. So based on that, I'm probably going to give Jack Billings a 5.5 out of 10. Now for Josh Battle, he played 16 games this season, believe it or not. Feels like we haven't seen him play in a long time. But when he played, he just didn't find his position, and whether that's his fault and the coaches played him in a position and he just didn't pick it up, or he just didn't get any continuity because the coaches threw him around. He played in the back line, he played on the wing for a lot of the season, which I didn't like, and he played forward maybe once or twice, and I thought that's where he looked his best, but they kept him on the wing more times than not, which I think is detrimental to his progression, because I think he's going to be a very good tool forward for us, or maybe for another club. Again, similar with Billings. he's being rumoured to, or at least his manager's been rumoured to be talking to other clubs and just kind of sussing the market for him. But based on the news out of his exit meeting, he's not looking to break his contract at all. But the fact that there is even a little bit of talk, usually, even if it's a rumour, it's come from somewhere. And maybe he wants to, look at clubs that don't have forwards, like a Collingwood. They don't have tall forwards. They're struggling in that department. And he would definitely get a game there every week and he'd get more money. So that's something for him to consider. But, Josh Battle's year, it wasn't a great year. He played 16 games. He averaged 0.2 goals a game, which you'd expect playing up on the wing when I think he's probably better forward. So based on that, I'm probably going to give him probably a 4 out of 10. It's a bit harsh, I think, maybe, but I can't see him going above 5, so I'm going to go 4. Now, Ryan Burns, he played 16 games this season, so it's really great to see some youngsters getting through, and we've got a few more to talk about in this video, but Ryan Burns, really loved what he brought to the team. He's got some enthusiasm about him. He's got some grunt. He reminds me of a young Stuv, little Jack Stephen running around. He's short, light framed, but he's just quick, and his brain's quick, and his kicking's very good. Most games he played this year, his kicking was up there with the best in terms of efficiency on the ground. And in a few games, he had the most marks on the ground. So that shows the fact that he can run out games. He's got some endurance about him, and he's only going to get better the more we give him exposure to AFL football. So Ryan Burns, 16 games this season. Loved, every bit of seeing this guy run around. He's only going to get better. I'm giving him a 7 out of 10. Now, Nick Coffield, another question mark on this guy. His season, we gave him chances early. It didn't work out. He missed a few weeks with injury. He was dropped a few times as well. But again, like a lot of other players, he got going late. And he had one of his best games of the year in the last game of the year. So that, to me, was really great to see because he's one player I think is really important to our structure. And like Battle, like Billings, again, has been rumoured to be on the outer. Whether he's tradable or not, I don't think he is. I think we need to persist with Nick Coffield. His intercept marking is critical, especially if Hannebler doesn't play, and vice versa. They support each other. But if they're both in the same team and both allowing players like Wilkie and Dukes to run off their man and create and that creates a lot of offensive chains for us, I think is really beneficial. I mean, he's only 21 or 22, so he's only going to get better, like a lot of our team. So Nick Coffield, first half of the year wasn't great. Second half of the year, with more games, I thought he got more confidence. He got the ball and wanted to run more, and that's what I thought made him so critical for us in 2020, is that when he got the ball, he didn't just kick it sideways, he attacked. And the first half of this year, he kicked sideways, he was nervous, he didn't back himself. Second half of the year, Coffield started to back himself, and his form picked up. So based on that, I'm going to give Nick Coffield a 6.5 out of 10. Ben Long remade himself a little bit. The coach, or at least, he did and the coaches did. And that was when they brought him back in after the bye and put him into the forward pocket as a defensive forward. And that changed the way we played. We were more physical, and that kind of was coincided with our spike in form when we won 3 games in a row. We beat Richmond, we beat Brisbane, we beat Collingwood, and our form picked up. And I think that was based off the aggression that he provided in the forward half and created a lot of turnovers. It was a lot of chaos football, and I think that's when St Kilda are at their best. And Ben Long, I thought, could have just sat the year out basically at Sandy and been dropped and not really done anything about it. But the fact that they gave him an opportunity in the forward line and he took it was great to see. And I think he can be a pretty important player for us in the next few seasons. So based on Ben Long's year, 15 games, I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10. Now, Jack Bytel, a player that demands a lot of discussion because he only played 13 games this year and we expected more. What we've seen from him, he's been very good. Left foot, right foot, he can kick goals, kick 2 goals in the last game of the year, 17 disposals and I think 8 or 9 tackles. So that was close to his best game in the red, white and black. But he had a lot of other good games this year and he just did what he had to do when he played. There were games where he just had really good quarters, but then he went missing for the rest of the game. And I think that's probably why he was dropped a few times and he needed to work on not just big moments in games, but running out games and being a consistent contributor for 4 quarters. And at VFL, he did that every week. He was killing it, getting 30-plus posies, best on grounds. But for the club, Majority of the time he had really good games, but for some of the time he just went missing a bit too often. I think that's what the coaches probably wanted him to work on. But based on his form in general in the 13 games that he played, I was really impressed with what I saw from Bytel. I'm going to give him a 6.5 out of 10. Hunter Clark. I really thought this was the year for Hunter Clark to move into the midfield and become a really important player for us in there to support the likes of Steele, Jones, and just add that extra composure and class that I don't think we really have in the middle of the ground outside of Jack Steele. It's a lot of workmanlike, it's a lot of speed and frenetic football, but Hunter Clark is just able to slow down time and pick a pass and make plays around him look silly with how much time that he seemingly has. But his season was interrupted at 13 games. The big hit with Mackay from Adelaide, or Mackay, however you want to pronounce it, has really just stuffed his season and he didn't really come back after that. But he had some really special games. The game against Hawthorn was really, really awesome. And those 2 goals that he kicked against them, that was just a piss take the way he did it. Prancing around them, faking it, dummying players, running around the boundary and collecting handballs and kicking it over his head. He was having fun that day. And I think Hunter Clark needs to... he needs to find that balance of fun, but also get serious. It's not always going to be fun. And I think he needs to get into a big preseason, really get fit, get firing, and come back stronger. Because I think that's probably the one downside to his year is that if you're going to play in the midfield and play on those bodies, they're going to push you around. So he needs to get a bit bigger. But again, he showed some signs that he's going to be a pretty special player for us, but probably not on that many occasions, which was a bit of a downside for me. So based on that, I'm going to give Hunter Clark a 5.5 out of 10. Tom Highmore. I don't really need to say much more than that. He came in, he slotted into that back line. When Coffield was out of the team, he picked up that intercept marking role, intercept defender, and he was amazing at it. That first half against Adelaide, that first quarter against Adelaide before the bye, I think he had 6 to 8 intercept marks, 10 disposals. He was on fire. And he did that a few times this year where he had big quarters, and especially when we're under pressure, and he was able to relieve that. And his kicking, I think, is very underrated. When he gets the ball, he doesn't take long to get rid of it, but he always hits the right target. And sometimes that target's under pressure, but the kick is so spot on that the defender or whoever's on the player he's kicking to cannot get near it to spoil it. So Tom Highmore, awesome pickup. I'm loving the recruitment that we've set up lately, getting the players like Kel Wilkie, Tom Highmore, and we'll talk about him later, but Cooper Sharman, these sort of guys coming in from Adelaide, I believe, all of them. So it's really exciting times, and Tom Highmore did everything we could have asked for him this season. So I'm going to go pretty high on this one. I really think that he was right up there. I'm going to give him an 8.5 out of 10. I was thinking maybe 9.5, but I reckon Tom Highmore's, he'll get there, but 8.5 is pretty solid as well. Now, Zachy Jones, again, only 13 games for Zachy Jones, but when he played, full of enthusiasm, supported Jack Steele wonderfully. He had some massive games. I think that game against Hawthorn I mentioned before, he was, I think, close to best on ground in that game. Dominated. He had some big number games. And I think his kicking got better, and that's a big, the big if on Zach Jones is his kicking. If he gets the ball, is he going to use it? And I think he did. He got better as the season went on. The only downside to his year really was that, we were always worried that he was going to get injured, and whether his hamstrings and everything was just going to pull up. You got 13 games out of him. It wasn't enough, but that's pretty much our season in a nutshell across the board. Is most players, apart from 3 or 4, played 13 to 16 games and missed a few here and there, and that's just the injury. The bad luck at the injury table that we had this year. But Zach Jones, I really, really liked his year. 8 out of 10. Now, Rowan Marshall, again, 13 games. These guys are so important to us. You get 13 games out of 22. That's not enough. And that's the reason why we didn't play finals, apart from the inconsistency in general. But the inconsistency comes with the fact that Marshall's out of the team, in the team, out of the team. Jones is out of the team, in the team. So these sort of guys, we need to get 20 plus games out of them next year if we are serious about making finals and challenging for the flag. We can't get 13, 12, 11 out of them and expect any different than what we got. But Rowan Marshall, like Zach Jones, when he played, was close to our most important player on the ground. He had some big numbers towards the end of the season. He had a massive performance against Sydney, against Tom Hickey, and took him to the cleaners. But he was also taken to the cleaners the week after against Reece Stanley, but then finished the year on a high, kicked 2 goals, 21 disposals, 10 marks against Fremantle, and was close to best on ground with Jack Steele. Rowe's just going to get better. I think, Paddy and him have been such a good duo for the last year and a half, but they've had to learn to deal with football on their own, and the last month or two of football was just Rowe on his own, and I think he really did thrive. And if that's the case next year, and Paddy's got limited minutes because of his age or injury or whatnot, I think Rowe's gonna really thrive in that environment, and I think his season this year, based on the 13 games, was still pretty solid. So I'm going to go with a 7 out of 10. Now, Luke Dunstan, a pretty controversial one, I think. Rumours are that he's been delisted, that we're just going to get him off the list, get him off the books, and he's going to be free to a new home very soon. But a player that, again, at the start of the year was said, unless there's injuries, you're not really going to get a game, mate. You're down the pecking order, and I think that kind of made him mentally check out, or mentally just look around and realize that maybe even if I play good footy this year, my future's not at the club, not at St Kilda, and that's looking that way at the moment. But he got through 12 games. His second half, particularly right after the bye, that Richmond game was enormous. He won, I think, the Jack Dyer medal. And his month after that was just incredible. He had 26 disposals and more in about 4 or 5 of those games right after the bye. And he's going to poll some Brownlow votes. That's how good his second half of the year was. He'll take some votes of Jack Steele. So you'll see, Jack Steele 3 votes, Luke Dunstan 2, Luke Dunstan 3 votes, Jack Steele 2 in a few games, I think, in the second half of the year. And that's a testament to his form. He could have just, again, like I mentioned with Ben Long, just taken the news and gone back to Sandy and just kind of bided his time there until the end of the year to go through the whole process of organising a trade away from the club. But he knuckled down. He made himself look amazing. Whether that's consistent enough, it remains to be seen. But that 6-game patch after the bye was excellent. He didn't finish the year as good as that form. It did kind of peter off, and he was dropped for the round 23 game against Fremantle. So that kind of says everything you need to know about where he sits at the club at the moment. But based on his 12 games, and particularly that form right after the bye, it was very strong form. So Luke Dunstan, I'm probably going to give him a 7 out of 10. Dan McKenzie, surprise packet of the year. So good to see him pick up form and really get going and become a really important player in the 22. So for me, it's a pretty easy one. I really was impressed with Dan McKenzie. Not only the fact that he could hit the scoreboard when he played, he did that consistently. But his defensive work was next level. He never stopped running. His marking was great, and his kicking got really good. He never missed a target. He was a very, very consistent contributor. He only played 12 games this year, but I really think that he could play almost every game next year if he can stay injury-free and become a really important player for us in 2022. So based on that and his 12 games, Dan McKenzie, I'm giving him an 8 out of 10. Now, Paddy, 12 games. We wanted to see more, but again, his age, injury, it's all going to be expected in the next couple of years. We just have to, that's just the reality of it. But Paddy had some big performances, I thought, this year, and he was really important to us in most of our wins that he played in. So Paddy Ryde, I'm going to give him a 7.5 out of 10. Jack Lonie, 11 games. We'll speed it up now because we're getting to the part of the video where a lot of these players haven't played a lot of games. But Jack Lonie, he played 11 games, 0.4 goals per game. Not good enough for a small forward, and he didn't really get much of a look into the lineup in the second half of the year. So based on that, Jack Lonie, pretty low one, but I'm going to give him a 3 out of 10. Mason Wood, started slow, but got going, and I think he was actually in some pretty decent form before he got injured and missed the rest of the year. He was going in 0.8 goals a game, so that's much higher than a lot of other forwards in our team this year. He played 9 games. He was averaging, I think, 10 disposals and a goal. But there were a couple of games just before he got injured where he was getting some high numbers and looking really, really good. So based on that, I'm pretty happy with the way Mason Wood went. Hopefully he gets more of a go at it next year. And if not, even so, he's good depth and he'll be on the list, that's for sure. So Mason Wood, I'm going to give him a 6.5 out of 10. Leo Connolly, 7 games, but showed so much enthusiasm, so much speed. and so much dare. That's what I love the most about Leo Connolly. He was willing to take the game on, willing to take risks when even some of the senior players were just too shit scared to do it. He didn't. He took the game on. He said, stuff this, I'm putting the ball under my arm and I'm running. I thought that was really exciting to see, and he's only going to get better with more game time. But based on his 7 games and what he brought to the team, I'm really impressed with Leo Connolly. I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. Paul Hunter, he played 7 games, but all those games was when we needed someone to support another ruckman, or we had no ruckman because they were both injured. It was just he's a controversial one to talk about because I think he only really played because of the injuries. He's really, bottom tier depth player for the club at the moment. No disrespect to him, but I think he knows he's in that position. He'd be on pretty low money, but he tried his gut out. He tried every week he played, and it's hard to see all the comments online about him, but he did try. It just wasn't good enough for some weeks. But Paul Hunter, 7 games, I'm going to give him a 4 out of 10. Dean Kent, 7 games, but he left, his best form until the end. He was in, he took the piss against Fremantle. He was great. I think he kicked 2 or 3 goals. Even in the Sydney win a couple of weeks prior to that, he kicked 3 goals and was really good. So his second half of the year, particularly his last month of football, was really good. But again, only 7 games of the year, inconsistent as always. He'll have, 2 or 3 really, kind of quiet average games, and he'll have a couple in a row, or, just 1 in 5 of really good football and kick 2 or 3 goals and look $1 million. But, Dean Kent's not probably starting 22 in our forward line. He'd be a depth player potentially, depending on injuries, but nonetheless, he played 7 games. He tried his heart out in every game, and he offered some attacking support in the second half of the year, particularly late in the season. So Dean Kent, I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10. Oscar Claverino, 5 games. I thought he showed signs. There's been a lot of talk, again, like a lot of players on our list, whether, we trade him or we look to, does he get more time at Sandy? Is he worth persisting with? And I think he definitely is. I think he's got the traits to be a pretty good defender. He flies at the ball, he puts his body on the line, and he's a decent kick, and he's a great mark. So with the 5 games that I saw of him, I thought he was pretty good. But again, 5 games is a pretty small sample size. So based on that, I'm probably going to give him a 5 out of 10. Darragh Joyce, 5 games, again, similar to Oscar Claverino, did what he had to do when he was brought into the team, whether it was for injury or for form. But I was really happy with him, and I hope he stays at the club for the next couple of years. I think he offers some really good defensive support for whether, any time that Wilkie goes down or Dougal Howard. He's a big body, he's not a bad kick, and he's aggressive on his forwards that he mans up on. And I thought he had a really good game against Geelong a couple of weeks ago. So based on that, Darragh Joyce, I'm going to give him a 5.5 out of 10. Cooper Sharman now, 5 games. I think he finished the year averaging 2 goals a game exactly with his 5 games. So 10 goals there, I think, for his year or something like that, averaging about 3.5, I think, contested marks a game or something. The numbers here right in front of me, they're really impressive. We couldn't have asked for much more. He was a bit stiff to not get the NAB Rising Star nomination in round 23. But that doesn't matter. He's going to be a very good player for us. He's a great set shot. And in the 5 games that he played, he excelled in every single one of them. So Cooper Sharman, I'm going to give him a 8 out of 10. Jakey Carlisle only played the 4 games, and that was very early on in the year. After that, back injuries and just couldn't get on the park. So unfortunately for Jake Carlisle, I'm going to give him a 3 out of 10. Sean McKernan now, again, like Carlisle, 4 games. Played 4, didn't really hit the scoreboard as much as we would have liked. Didn't, really offer too much outside of support in the ruck when we needed to. So based on that, Sean McKernan, similar to Jake Carlisle, 3 out of 10. Jaron Geary, our co-captain with Jack Steele, only played the 3 games. Not much of a sample size to rate him on. I'm going to give him a 3 out of 10 as well. Now on to Jade Gresham, who's an interesting one because he only played the 3 games, right? So it's hard to judge someone when they've only played 3 games. But based on the 3 games, I thought he was one of our better players in round 1. I thought he was pretty damn good in round 2, and he was looking good in round 3 before he did his injury and didn't finish the game against Essendon. So based on that, I'm going to just give him a default a default rating of 5 out of 10. Just that he played the 3 games, which is why he's not going to get any higher than 5. But I thought when he did play, although it was only the 3 games, I thought he was pretty good. So that's why he is getting 5. So 5 out of 10 for Jade Gresham. Now to James Frawley. Again, 2 games for James Frawley, which is fitting, I suppose, because that was Spud's number. He wore the 24, obviously, which was Spud's first number. But it was a bit sad to see that we didn't get to see him run out with that Guernsey on more occasions this year, only the 2 games, but I think he did what he had to do in that first game. I think he was on Hawkins against Geelong, correct me if I'm wrong, Sainers, but he kept him pretty quiet, and I mean, we wanted to get more out of him, but he was never going to be a season where we saw James Frawley play 20 games. The weird thing is, going into the season, we all thought maybe he would be favoured ahead of Jake Carlisle and we would see a lot of Dougal, Howard, James Frawley, but it wasn't to be. Only 2 games for James Frawley. So based on that, I'm going to give him a 4 out of 10. And now lucky last, although maybe not lucky, Dan Hannebler. 2 games, finished them at the end of the year. They were pretty solid games, to be honest. The one against Geelong, he was exceptional in the second half. And then against Fremantle, he got more confidence in his body. He had over 22, I think, disposals and really high disposal efficiency and just looked back to his old self. But anytime we say that, there's always a bit of a worry, bit of a voice in the back of your head saying, don't get too excited, Jakey, because he might do a hammy, he might do something, and you'll never see him play again. So the fact that he got through the 2 games, I think, was the big positive out of the year. It would have been really shit to go through an entire year and realise that Dan Hannebler didn't even get on the park. But for him to finish the year, get some form, get some footy into him, get some confidence in his body, I think is really important for him and for the club moving into 2022. But because he only played the 2 games, because he's on supposedly on a fair bit of money, and I guess the money is irrelevant, but I know a lot of people will take that into consideration when they go through their own ratings. The fact that he only played the 2 games and we didn't get to see enough of him is probably why I'm going to give him I don't want to go too low because his 2 games were solid, but the fact that there were only 2, then I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to give him a 3 out of 10. Anything higher I think would have been pretty generous. Like 5 you're not going to get, 4 probably not. I think 3 is fitting. 3 for Dan Hannebler. That's it, guys. That's the player ratings for season 2021. The only 10 there, I think, was Jack Steele, and no one got 9s. It was pretty generous, I thought. Let me know what you guys think and where I was wrong and where what you would change. I'd love to see your player ratings for the whole team or just certain players. Feel free to comment and let me know. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. We've just hit over 2,000 subscribers, so I thank everyone that has subscribed so far. But let's go on. Let's hit 3. Let's hit 4. Let's keep growing. And I'll be doing more videos on this channel in the off-season as well. Trade news. I'll do a season review soon as well, but I thought a player ratings would be a pretty fun video to get started. So enjoy the rest of your Friday, guys. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, whenever you watch this video, in fact. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, guys, and go you mighty Sainers.